Hi, I'm Michael Finnigan from i2i, and on the screen here behind me we've got a typical example of what we call an AVA record summary card for a fictitious person. We've named him actually John Smith, but it's just a standard kind of report that we would use to detail the benefits of this amazing product. When you get further into this little session here, you'll see there's a link at the end. One of those links tells about the history of psychometrics, and the other one talks about the history of this specific product, the Walter V. Clark AVA, which was the first of its kind. Now, in 1991, when I was looking for a behavioural profiling system or a psychometric to underpin some recruitment I was doing, I looked at the whole market, and I probably interviewed, I'm guessing, about 12 people to look at their products. I chose this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's relatively simple to input the data. And when I say simple, what I mean is it's a free response system, so you're not being forced to choose between certain answers, because it's not trying to squeeze you into a box where the system again can then print off one of its 20 or so standard reports. It's not trying to do that. It's giving you absolute freedom to describe yourself as you choose to do so. And consequently, each single report and each set of data that we've ever seen since 1992 is absolutely unique to the individual person, which means you can make an exact hiring decision, an exact assessment decision, or an exact decision around how to coach and develop a specific person. They're all totally unique. So I really liked the way that we had the freedom of response, but the quickness of getting that data. It's just no more than probably half an hour for a person to complete. And yet, as I've gone on to say there, the specific nature of the data is the highest quality. So I was looking at something that was relatively low in cost compared to the £2,500 you'll see for a more advanced report. It was easy to do compared to the 4.5 hours of papers you're sometimes expected to undertake. And yet, I would say the data is, I'm going to say, every bit as good as the data that you get from those extended systems that you can get yourself into. So in my mind, when I saw them all, and I did see both extremes of the market, there was absolutely no question that this was the right tool for me. It was the right tool then, it's the right tool, and I had no idea at the time that it was a pioneer, the first of its kind, and that Walter V. Clark was the man who invented what's known as the DISC language, D-I-S-C language. So that was a bonus, but actually the quality and integrity of the system is just absolutely second to none. Now, what I also want to say is that this is a typical report card that we see. You as the customer or the recipient of the information don't get to see this. You get a formal written report. Remember, each one is individually written and looked at by at least 2 people before the report's compiled, possibly even 3. So we get this data here. Now, most systems are doing 2 things. First of all, they're giving you one of a number of specific reports. And seriously, that might be 12, 16, 20, 24, 32 reports. It'll be very, very few reports. This system doesn't have that. It's literally limitless. I've probably looked at 5 reports a day for 23 years on average and never seen the same report twice, because the data is infinitely rich. What it's also doing is most systems are just giving you 4 data points, the vector 1, 2, 3 and 4 as we call it, which in most terminology is DISC. You get similar language in things like Myers-Briggs, similar language in things like 16PF, but you normally get 4 main points of data. DISC, in our case 1, 2, 3, 4. What you'll notice as I take you through this is the wealth of data that's on this screen, and that's giving us a very specific picture of the individual. Another item that I want to pick out here is that, first of all, I'm going to explain this in the one hand as if I was reading it to the boss of this person or the potential employer of this person, but I also want you to get a flavour for when we do a read back on a controlled video assignment like this, how we would read it back to the individual himself, in this case John Smith. So the read back to his boss will be painting a much more balanced picture to say, look, here's a strength of this guy, but you need to really investigate this and see if it's a bit of baggage that you want him to bring with him. Whereas if we were just presenting this on a video read back to John himself, we would just probably emphasize the positives and maybe hint that he might want to investigate 1 or 2 areas. Because when we're reading back to John Smith himself, we want him to be left with a positive experience, which will then open him up for a longer conversation with his boss, or indeed maybe back with us, When we're reading it back to the boss, it might be a hiring situation. We need to be very specific about the information that we're giving there and very focused on the pluses and the minuses. So let me show you how we would play with that. First of all, the report is giving us a read on 3 graphs, as you'll see from the screen here. The first graph at the top is the image, as it says there, and that is the first impression or the overriding impression you're left with when you don't know the person very well. And I'll explain why that'll come in a minute. So this is when you don't know the person very well, that is how he will strike you. The second image in the middle of the page, and it's called the role here, the second set of data. This is about how he thinks he projects himself to you. So it's the feedback he's getting from you on how he thinks you see him as a person. And this is who he really is. There's a poem in popular psychology that we use when we're teaching this that says, I saw a man walk down the road and down the road walked he. The man he was, the man I saw, and the man he wanted to be. So that's his idealized version of himself, where he is trying to get to. People are not sure when this 3-phase personality forms in human development. It's probably quite early. It's probably when your mother tells you to eat all your lunch, or to drink it nicely out of the cup, or to take your feet off a table. Maybe when you're 1 or 2 years old. Up until then, life's probably pretty simple. As a baby, you can do no wrong. As you start to get older, you start to realise that this is who I am as a person, but if I want to have a successful relationship with my mother, I'm going to have to adapt my behaviour somewhat. And what you'll notice is then that the adapted style, often called the mask, by the way, or the role, plus the natural self creates the image. So it's a combination of the two. You see this particularly in interview situations. When you've got a candidate in front of you, when he or she relaxes, you'll see the self. So when you talk about family or education or something they're confident on and comfortable with, you'll get a glimpse of the real person. When you then get into a difficult area, why did you leave your last job? Tell me about a difficult relationship you've had with a customer. You'll then more see the idealized version where they'll put on the bit of a mask, they'll do a little bit of role playing, and they'll then become a little more tense and conscious in terms of the information they're giving you. Here, they're going to give you natural information. That's why as an interview, you're left with this combination picture, which might not be accurately the real person who you're going to employ. This is the person you employ. This is the person you may be left with the impression with at interview. In this case, they're very similar, but some cases, you know it, you've seen it happen, they can be very, very different. That's why you must use something, and we would always recommend something as detailed as the AVA because it's simply the best of its kind we've ever seen on the market. The reports are in depth, they're probably 12 pages, they're individually written by at least 2 people, so every single time you're getting something very specific to help inform your hiring decision, your coaching process, or your development method for an individual in your team already. So a lot of specific information. So let's leave the image alone. Remember, that's the first impression and the overall abiding impression when you don't know the person very well. Let's go to this phase of John's profile. And let me just tell you about him as a person, as if you were John now watching this. So John, this is your profile. This is who you perceive yourself to be. Let me talk to you about what I like about this profile specifically. Can you see how it covers 1, 2, 3, 4 areas of the graph? What it means is we've got a very, very broadly constructed personality here. A person who's comfortable with who he is and so feels confident in living those behaviours demonstrably in his life. So those behaviours, John, in you are going to be easy to see. Now let me just pick out now the specifics. Here's the ipsative, the balancing middle point of the profile, and it's nice when we've got pictures of little dots either side of that. The ones furthest away are the most interesting. Now in this situation, the ones furthest away are extreme, and we know they're extreme because they've been assigned a red dot. The computer's saying, look, double extreme, single extreme. So these are very much extenuated qualities of you as an individual. The first dot, V1, plots at 0.66 on our chart, and it's measuring assertiveness. So this is a double asterisk, an extremely highly assertive individual, driven, competitive, combative, full of initiative, full of ideas, full of action, wants to win, wants to excel, wants to achieve, wants to be the best. Fantastic leadership quality in terms of that drive to achieve, to take the lead. The second point relates to sociability. You can see it plots at 44 on our chart, and it's to the left of ipsative. That means it's a low quality. So this person, John, does not possess lots of extroversion. Equally though, he's not at the end of the scale, so he's by no means introverted. It's not that interesting when it's close to the ipsative, but it's saying, I'm not an extrovert, I'm not an introvert, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm situationally okay with people, but I'm certainly not warm in that sense. This one here then is pace. This is measuring calmness at the high end and pace. So at the high end we would have a calm person. Here we've got a person who moves very, very quickly. Wants lots in his life, lots of variety, lots to do, wants to be busy, likes deadlines, likes to achieve in, performs really well at the last minute in terms of getting things done. Needs lots of variety to stimulate him in his environment. And then the final point is about conformity, detail, accuracy, precision. And in this case, John, again, it's ipsative, which means it's not that pronounced either way, but it does mean comfortable with detail. Now, it would not be unusual in a corporate situation for a big city firm like a Deloitte's or a big law firm to see that profile in a manager. Now, where this system wins over so many other systems, let me point out at least 4 things here. First of all, we're getting a reading on self-esteem, AR. How much does this person like themselves? And also, therefore, how much do they expect things to work out well? Now, that's an okay score. It's not a brilliant score, but it's okay, and we're quite happy with that. So John has a fairly healthy view of the world. This dot here, then, unconnected from the main 4 with these 3 blue lines, is a dot that's all around energy and drive. And that's a pretty good score. That's a quite highly driven individual. Now that means the ability to sustain periods of work over a long period of time and yet high standards. So real good mental stamina and physical stamina, in fairness, to get jobs done. That person needs an environment where there's lots of challenge, John. So that's, again, a great profile maybe for a senior management role. And this one then, this final dot here, which we call Vector 5, the 5th dot in the profile, is all about maturity and a developed set of standards. And we like to see that somewhere to the right of ipsative, but not too high. So that person, Johns, brings with him a nice value set with good standards and good expectations of himself and those around him. Those final 3 bits of information, the self-esteem score, the energy score, and the maturity score, are unique to AVA. We do not see them anywhere else. The final thing I'm going to bring to bear on this, and I love it in your report, John, is that we also get a self-description. And I'll occasionally highlight these because there are certain things I want to bring out. Here, for instance, John's saying, I'm a little nervous in large crowds and manage by forcing myself to talk. Perhaps sometimes I lack empathy to develop conversations fully. Now that's because his sociability is not high here, John. That's what that is. That's why a person would say that. So that's where you get the additional perspective of the individual writing about their own feelings, which are reflected hopefully in the form. We can use it as a kind of check and balance system. So we would want John to be feeling very positive about what we've just read there. Highly assertive, situationally sociable with people, very fast moving, and enough attention to detail to make sure the job gets done. The profile of a typical senior manager, good energy, good morale and self-esteem, and a good level of maturity to bring a good value set to bear on the situation. That's how we'd want John to feel, a nice wide graph. If we were feeding this back to John's boss or to a person hiring John, we'd also want to say that yes, these are highly developed parts of his personality, of his behaviour. However, they do come with a warning. That's why there are the asterisks where they're needed. In other words, if John is an extremely positive person and we know that he's okay, that isn't a brilliant score, it's a decent score, but this highly assertive nature then also brings with it disruption. If you've got a highly assertive person, a very highly assertive person, they can, on a bad day, be labelled with words such as aggressive, bullying, domineering, even intimidating. There is no question that with a profile like that, those probably will have been levelled at John before. We would want you as a boss to kind of do 2 things. First of all, to assess that at interview by asking the right questions and creating the right environment. And definitely in a reference check, we'd want you to ask if there's been any issues like that with this individual. It's a double asterisk. The system's warning you to please develop this and investigate it further. The same goes for the low vector 3 score, remember, the impatience and the actual pace of work, can he be too fast? Can he have more of a butterfly mind? Does he have the ability to stick with a problem in a dogged situation? If you can see the space here that says JAR, that's a space for a job activity rating score. And what we can then do is we can put your ideal for the job in that box there, and we can measure John against that, so that when we're giving you the feedback, we can say Johnny's a very good match for your ideal candidate, or he's actually an okay match. We can give you a very accurate reading on how good a match is, incredibly accurate, in fact, to I think 2 decimal places. So actually, we've got a fantastic piece of information here. We can present it very positively to John so that he feels good about himself. That's really important, whether you employ him or not. We want him to feel good about his experience. But to you, we can just highlight these little, what we call red flag areas, to say, look, this is an extreme profile. On his best day, he's very good. He's a great expediter. He's a great deliverer of results. But on his bad day, he can be difficult. He can be antagonistic. And you've got to ask yourself whether you want that to bring to bear on the position that you're advertising or looking to fill in some way from an internal appointment. So that's John. I hope that's clear in terms of how we present it to you and how we present it to him. I mean, when we go into the second phase of the profile, you can see here from the congruence we can read, and again it's red starred asterisk, is that the profiles are almost identical. The maximum score there is 1.00 and John scores 0.98. Now what we're going to say to John is, John, look at that. Now what that's saying is that what you see is what you get. So what's good about that, John? Well, what's good about that is that once we get to know you, we can rely on the fact that we have a consistent view of you as a person. You're not going to be inconsistent. You're not going to be unpredictable, because you're very much consistent in all these 3 charts. If we were reading that back to the boss of John, or the prospective boss of John, we'd say, look, what you see is what you get. What's good about that is you get incredible consistency with this employee, potential employee. But also what you've got to realise is that he doesn't change his style too easily. He's not going to adapt very much to change his approach. Now again, only you as the employer can decide whether you're prepared to live with that, or if that's a little bit too inflexible for you as a company, or you as a team, or even you as a boss maybe. So those are examples of how we change the structure of this information. I hope you're picking up here that this incredibly unique tapestry gives us a very clear picture of this person with very specific advice for you if you're the boss or potential boss of this person, but also gives John a lot of information for him to maximize his best qualities. So John would be saying, please make sure that you are always assertive, always confident, and always giving clear direction. But please realize that on the downside of that you're not playing to the point of becoming domineering or overbearing in a given situation. We want him to feel very positive. We want you as the boss to have the clear picture of both sides of that personality, and AVA certainly gives you that. These profiles take about an hour to complete, half an hour to complete. They then probably take us 24 hours or so to read them. 2 people will look at it and will then produce your detailed report. We find that this is the best format for these reports, because what we can do here is we can give it to you in a YouTube format with a secure link so that you can download the information. John can have it, you can have it, and then you've got it then for about a year before we recommend that you reassess the individual if this was a member of your team. So you've always got it there then to refer to. If John's going really well, what is it that he's doing well? If John's having an issue, what is the clue in here that might tell me what the issue is? You'll see it in the written report, but I think you're more likely to get it from something that one of us might say when we're reading that back this report in this format, just something for you to continually refer back to. We often think that when we're doing physical readbacks, either over the phone or face-to-face, that whilst they're brilliant, they only probably last 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And we're relying on us to say everything properly and on you to record all that information and be able to remember in that 30-minute, 45-minute snapshot exactly what it is we've said. Now, the reality is that's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to be thinking about something that we say. And then whilst you're still processing that, we're making the next point, which you then might miss. That's not going to happen if you have it in this YouTube format. It's going to be there for 12 months for you to refer to, confidentially, by the way, but as often as you like, so you can keep getting a second piece of advice and insight on John Smith. I hope that's been a useful little tour through what we can get out of reading an AVA back over this format. As I said, there are 2 links, one that tells you about the history of psychometric profiling and one that tells you about the history of this wonderful system, the Walter Clark AVA. Please have a look at those. If you have any questions, you know where we are. Please come and find you. We'd be happy to give you a full demonstration. And absolutely, after 20 odd years of working with this thing, 100% confident it will be the very best system you'll ever see and you'll ever use. Thanks for watching.